All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on the war in the Middle East. Rebecca Castor with this report.
After nearly a month of relentless strikes on Iranian targets, President Trump says Iran's remaining leaders are begging to make a deal.
They're talking to us because they've got a disaster on their hands. They're defeated. They can't make a comeback.
At Thursday's cabinet meeting, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff confirmed Pakistan helped deliver Trump's 15-point peace plan to the Iranians.
And you have directed us to maintain confidentiality on the specific terms. We have told Iran one last thing: don't miscalculate again.
While the Iranians are denying the talks publicly, President Trump revealed a gift they sent earlier this week.
They said to show you the fact that we're real and solid, and we're there. We're going to let you have 8 boats of oil. They then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats.
But the commander-in-chief is making preparations in case diplomacy fails. Marines and elite Army paratroopers are heading to the region, raising concerns on Capitol Hill that ground operations could be coming.
The president seems bent on a path toward putting our sons and daughters in harm's way.
The answer is no. We can achieve the strategic goals that Donald Trump wants to achieve without doing that.
Some Gulf allies are concerned the U.S. will end the war too soon, leaving them vulnerable to future attacks. But President Trump says they'll be protected. At the White House, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
And a live look at the White House on this Thursday evening. We do want to bring in retired Marine intelligence officer, national security analyst, and the host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer. He's here with me. Hal, a 10-day extension we heard today from President Trump. We'll get to that in a moment, but we just got some breaking news in within the past hour or so from the Wall Street Journal. They just sent this out. I'll read it. They say the Pentagon is looking at sending up to 10,000 additional ground troops to the Middle East to give President Trump more military options, even as he weighs peace talks with Tehran, Department of Defense officials with knowledge of the planning said. So, Hal, 10,000 additional troops. We were reading through the journal's reporting. It doesn't appear that it's clear what part of the military these 10,000 are going to be coming from. But when you see the number 10,000, what questions come to mind?
Well, actually, when I see the number 10,000, we're already sending the first 1,000 of what I thought was going to be 3,000 of 82nd Airborne, which is an immediate response force that we're sending over there. What this could be is adding another brigade onto that, plus some other support. So that would bring it up to about 10,000, or it could be they're bringing in some other troops from somewhere else. But what that does is just deploying them in theater, not using them in combat, not using them to take anything, but just having them in theater actually changes the math for Iran and certainly for the IRGC, because now they're looking at a force that's big enough to take not only these smaller islands in the Strait of Hormuz and potentially Kark Island, further up the Persian Gulf where 90% of the oil comes out of, but now they're looking at a force that, if combined with some forces from the GCC countries, particularly I'm thinking of Saudi Arabia, potentially could take Qasem Island and hold Qasem Island as well. And there certainly is a scenario in there without invading, the mainland, if you will, of Iran, that we could literally do, I hate it to sound very World War II-ish, but almost an island hopping campaign throughout the Persian Gulf, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz, and basically could take control of the Strait of Hormuz. And that 10,000 gives you that additional force structure you'd need as shock troops to basically take those types of those island objectives.
So President Trump did have a cabinet meeting today. We heard a lot from the president and from some of his closest advisors. Today, we heard that a 10-day extension was announced by the president. Basically, just to give a little bit of background, President Trump has been saying that they will not strike energy infrastructure, basically, within Iran. Right now, President Trump says this 10-day extension is going to last until, I believe, April 6th, if I have it right. Is Trump striking an easier tone than we're used to with Iran?
It's interesting. You almost hear like two different tones in the same meeting. On the one hand, you'll hear something that sounds, certainly like there's discussions, negotiations, there's consideration going both ways. He talked today about the present was the term he used for that the Iranians, not clear which Iranians, authorized initially 8 tankers to come through, and by the time it was done, 2 more were added, so it was 10 total tankers. My understanding is that some, maybe most, maybe not, I don't know, maybe all of the tankers were Pakistani flagged, but they were allowed to go through the state of Hormuz to get more oil out. Rather interesting, but that's on the, that's sort of it makes it sound like the things are toning down. On the other hand, the real world of what's going on out there is there's lots of strike missions, and the U.S. and Israeli planes are hitting a lot of targets, and in many cases they're going back to some of those more difficult targets where they have those underground missile cities, and they're hitting them again and again to take out the launcher systems in order to clog them up and slow them down. So you hear that, and then if you also see where 10,000 additional troops, you got 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit that's coming into CENTCOM's area of responsibility, I believe tomorrow. You got 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit that's steaming across the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, might be in days ahead, and then you have the first 1,000 of 3,000 82nd Airborne troops that may be in CENTCOM's area of responsibility. I'm not quite sure. And so on the one hand, it's I don't know if you call it a carrot and stick. I guess the carrot is that there's some level of diplomatic exchange, some level of language, not direct talks, but indirect talks going on. And then the other is that we're getting ready to do some stuff that if those talks go sideways, we might do things like take Kark Island.
Trump earlier this week cryptically said that Iran gave the U.S. a present, which we've now learned was the allowance of 8 boats of oil to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Those tankers are under Pakistani flags, we're learning. How far do signs of good faith typically go with President Trump?
That helps a lot. That actually was very interesting, and it says a lot that it was Pakistani flag. Who is our main interlocutor working with the Iranians? As far as we know, it's working with the Pakistanis. So they allowed these Pakistanis, not the first time. I should mention that the Iranians have let tankers and other ships go through the straits, not a lot, but a few. And some of those were Pakistani flags. So does seem to be some sort of rapport going here with Pakistan, that some sort of consideration given to Pakistan, and then at the same time, kind of, I guess you could call it a present or whatever. I'd say consideration to the U.S. and allowing some traffic to go through. Now, that's not oil that's going to come to the U.S. And a lot of people point out, it's like, so what's the point? That's great those tankers went through, but that oil is going to go somewhere else in the world. That's true, but at least it is some traffic going through. And you can be sure that when we're watching those tankers go through, we're watching very closely the way that they went through, trying to figure out the exact routes they're using. Because one of the big concerns we have is of sea mining. And there's a variety of different sea mines that can be used. Some sit on the ocean floor, and it's not that deep in the Strait of Hormuz, and they sense anomalies, magnetic or movement or something on the surface, and they'll launch a sea mine up to attack a ship. Some actually have the capability of launching torpedoes. There's just a variety of different sea mines out there. They're not just dumb mines floating uselessly in the ocean, which is kind of an impression we got from some of the sea mining issues that popped up in the Black Sea after the Ukraine war broke out. They have sea mines with more capabilities. So we're watching very closely where these ships are going, because that indicates that those particular lanes may be open to future traffic, which may be able to, assuming we seize control or take control or develop some sort of greater control within the strait, that might be a way to put that surge of backed up tanker traffic through the strait a lot faster.
So going back to President Trump's extended deadline for the strait, he's basically saying he will not strike energy infrastructure for another 10 days. But I don't want to get people confused when they hear that. The U.S. is not ceasing all strikes on Iran, correct, Hal?
No, absolutely not. We're doing strike missions continuously. By the way, the Iranians are doing strike missions too. It's not like they've stopped. We've curtailed a lot of their stuff. The volume of ballistic missiles and drones they're launching compared to their peak periods have dropped off dramatically. You know, more than 90% of that is no longer there, which means it's under 10% of what it was. But they still get a few through. And General Votel, the commander of U.S. Central Command, was talking about, you know, if you just, as long as they get a few through, it keeps everybody on edge. It reminds everybody that this still is an active war. It prevents a lot of things from taking place in terms of getting back to normal operations. So the Iranians are still doing strike missions. We're still doing strike missions. Obviously, we being the U.S. and Israel doing a lot of strike missions. And so it's very, very active in terms of what's happening.
So if this 10-day deadline lapses and we see no significant movement toward a deal, what type of targets will the U.S. be looking at, energy infrastructure-wise?
Interesting thing is it may change. You know, we're talking about blowing up power plants. I'm assuming some of this consideration is whomever we are talking to on the Iranian side, and this is you know, something that, you know, they might be a different part of the regime. They may be opposed to what the Revolutionary Guard Corps is doing. Don't know, but whomever we're talking to probably asked us, please do not blow up these power plants, because if we blow up the power plants, it's going to take them a very long time to get those things fixed. You know, obviously it knocks out the power, but when you knock out the power, you knock out all the other utilities that service some of these big cities. And Tehran, for example, is a very big city, and there are a number of large cities in Iran across the country. So they're obviously very, very concerned that something could really happen going into the summer, where they need not just power for air conditioning and stuff, but power to do water purification and power to do just about anything else, to include running hospitals and all sorts of stuff. So there's just a lot of reasons why we're probably holding off on that. Now, the question is, what are we going to be hitting? If we're not hitting the power plants, what are we hitting? And I think we're going to be doing more stuff where we're going after the Revolutionary Guard Corps and the besieged militia to disable that more extremist, autocratic, you know, tool that the regime uses to suppress the Iranian people.
A live look at Israel, about 4:30 in the morning, Tel Aviv time. Today, Israel announced that they killed Iranian naval commander Ali Reza Tangziri. Hal, this was a killing which Admiral Brad Cooper said will send Iran's Navy into irreversible decline. Mm-hmm. If you could put it into words, how much damage has actually been done to Iran's Navy since the war started?
I want to say over 90 major combatants, ships were taken out. That's pretty much their Navy. They don't really have much. What's significant about Tangziri is he was the Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. And I should kind of go back a little bit for those. There is the regular Navy, Air Force, Army, you know, that's in there. And then there's this sort of extreme Revolutionary Guard Corps, extremist, ideological, theocratic side, which is the IRGC, and then the besieged militia, which is kind of a paramilitary militia throughout the country, but they're pretty darn big. So you can't dismiss them. But the revolution, but what you saw was the ballistic missile stuff is pretty much all controlled by the Revolutionary Guard Corps. But what you would see is other things. For example, the Revolutionary Guard Corps would have certain naval things, not the big ships, but they would have smaller craft. They would have the miniature subs. They would control a lot of smaller boats, up to pretty good sized patrol craft, but smaller boats. And so by taking out him, you've taken out the person who is in charge of that, all that Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, IRGC stuff. That's the stuff that we have to eliminate now to get rid of that sea mining threat, to get rid of that anti-ship missile threat, to get rid of the drone threat, all the stuff that's threatening passage through the Strait of Hormuz. I kind of go with I go with what they're saying, which is that this is causing serious problems for them, because a lot of these commanders just stay there forever. So it's kind of like Hezbollah. Yeah, will they replace them with somebody? Yes. Will that person be as capable and have as much control as they do? Usually not. And it does cause major disruption in their command and control.
Hal Kempfer is the host of the Strat podcast. You can listen to Strat anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks, Hal.